Difficult conversations are always going to be a reality of anyone's workplace. Doing it well really matters. And the first thing that matters is the approach. Now, you know this, right? As kids, we know that if our parent says our full name, we're in trouble. If our teacher says, I want to see you in my office, it's not looking good. And similarly, if a colleague says, can we have a word? Something there is brewing. Immediately we start to get a bit edgy, right? All conversations begin with the approach, and that approach can either put us at ease or put us on edge. Both of these shape how we engage in that conversation. Again, brains are predictive machines, so it creates that expectation. So the first thing we need to think about in an approach is the space in which we raise challenges and difficult conversations. We're really sensitive to how other people might perceive us. So the most obvious thing is that if we're challenged in a public space, we're going to react far worse in order to protect our public persona. This wouldn't be the case if you have meetings where challenge and healthy critique is normalized, but where it isn't, you're going to get that defensive response. So always try and have those more difficult conversations in a discreet setting. Of course, if you are the person with power, just be a little bit careful about asking someone to your office because, from school onwards, we know what that means. Difficult conversations are also often better in a more neutral space. So I'm a really big fan of going for walks, and there's some really interesting theories around reducing face-to-face eye contact. For example, by walking together or facing the same direction, that is supposed to limit the threat response. At an unconscious level, when someone is directly opposite us, that kind of unconsciously triggers that threat response. So we need to get rid of that. So you can sit at right angles or facing the same direction. Asking someone out of their usual space also means that they're stepping out of that kind of anxious, competent professional mode and into something more open. There's some really interesting neuroscience around how particular environments actually trigger these behavior cascades, right? These personas we've built up in particular environments are triggered by those environments. So when we take people into different spaces, sometimes they're more open to difference and more open to challenge. And personally, I've had some brilliant breakthroughs in cafes and parks, or even just a different part of the same work building. So thinking about a discrete environment, thinking about changing the environment, and you're more likely to have a really sort of productive conversation from the approach onwards. Finally, of course, with the approach, you need to consider the language, right? So think about the difference between a performance review, oh God, I'm going to be judged, and a developmental conversation, which is kind of framed to be about that person's improvement. It's the difference between, you're messing this up, oh God, I'm awful, compared to how do you feel about trying to do it this way? Again, we're just trying to shift that tone from judgmental to learning. So really observe that language when you're having those difficult conversations. Anything that's sort of closed, certain, or final needs to shift to open, curious, temporary, and be focused really on the learning, not the critiquing. What's really important in that little bit there as well is the power of curiosity. People want to feel like you're interested in who they are, especially if you're giving them a difficult conversation. If you can take on genuine curiosity, right? If you can actually be curious, people will pick up on that. We're very sensitive to those kinds of little tonal shifts. And it means they'll feel that you're not just having a go at them, but you want to understand them and how to support them to improve. So really try and get into that curiosity, and you will have more success in those difficult conversations from that starting point onwards. So to summarize, discrete, neutral settings, thinking about where you're sitting in relation to that person, thinking about using that developmental language and engaging that curiosity. If you can do those things as you approach someone, that really sets a great tone for productive, difficult conversations.